I'm going to teach you how to make more silver in Albion Online using the skills and knowledge that you already have. Usually on this channel, we focus on getting better at PvP. And I've even said that sometimes you need to choose between a good lesson and a good payday. But today, we're going to assume that your goal is to simply maximize how much silver you make. We're going to discuss different strategies to make bigger profits in PvP related content. And this is not about more kills, which obviously helps as well, but this is going to be about everything else that you do before, during and after your fights or PvP situations. We are going to focus on 3 different parts. First of all, how to prepare for your content. This will be mostly strategies for choosing and buying your items, picking out your tier, build, consumables and stuff like that. Then we'll talk about actual strategies for the content that you are playing, and essentially mindsets that will help you approach and get the maximum out of different PvP situations you come across. We're focusing on playing solo or duo in the Mists, Roads of Avalon or open world. And finally, we'll talk a little bit about cashing in your profits. Once you are back out in the city, what are some of the things you can think about there to get the most out of your time? Let's go. Oh, and very quick, by the way, I've put a bunch of fight clips in the background for you to enjoy as you listen to me, as always. But if there's some specific fight you notice here on screen that you would like to have some more deeper analysis or my opinion on, then let me know in the comments, okay? And I will include it in a future more in-depth video. Let's go. Alright, so let's talk first about buying your items in preparation for some PvP content. And I'll cover 4 big points here. First of all, what tier, and the first question you should be having is, what tier am I going to play today? And there are 2 important answers to this question if your focus is to make as much silver as you can. First simple answer is don't risk more than you can afford. So if you're new or your bank just isn't looking that good right now, don't spend more than maybe 1/10 of your entire net worth in one single set of equipment. And I honestly suggest to go even lower than that for better results. I have a whole video called Reprogram Your Brain for PvP Success. You should watch it if you haven't yet. And there I talk about risking too much really starts messing with your head and makes you play worse. So it's not just about losing too much and then feeling bad, but it's about your performance. So first answer, if you don't have a lot of bank or if you're new, then don't risk too much, right? But there is another and more maybe relevant to today answer to the question what tier you should play if you want to make the maximum silver. And that answer is play tier 7. There, I said it. This sounds like a gross oversimplification. Of course, there are different strategies, different types of people and so on, blah, blah, blah. But from my experience, and I have quite a bit of it, as well as what I've confirmed with other experienced good PvP players, the most profitable tier on average by far is tier 7, with tier 6 and tier 8 being kind of close second place, let's say. So essentially you can kind of round it up to being middling tiers being the most profitable for PvP content when you're going alone or with your duo partner. Let's quickly discuss why that is the case. Tier 7 or tier 8, which has become a bit more popular, and I'll tell you in a moment why. So tier 7 gives you meaningful access to PvP. There are a lot of fights in the Mists, in Roads of Avalon, as well as the open world if you do manage to find some small groups or other solos. There are a lot of fights that you can take, both as an underdog with a chance of making big bank if you kill a much higher IP aggressor, as well as being the attacker or ganker yourself, killing or trying to benefit from lower IP opponents. So tier 7 gives you a lot of anti-rate as well, gives you an access to a lot of these situations and a lot of possible fights. It also gives you a meaningful ability to contest other objectives in the Mists or Roads or open world. You can handle PvE relatively well, depends a little bit on your build, and you can do this while you're waiting for next PvP to happen. And you can also meaningfully fight for camps or chests or whatever other objectives, like maybe crystal spiders in the Mists, or other things you come across. At the same time, however, tier 7 remains pretty cheap. This means that it's easier to play well, because you aren't risking that much, so you don't start worrying as much either. It also means that all the inevitable deaths that will happen, because welcome to Albion, this is the game, all of these deaths will not undermine the profits that you are making from other sources, from your kills, from PvE and other objectives. And when it comes to myths, and this is very important, if you are tier 7, it also means that in most PvP, multi-way PvP situations, or at least in many, you will not be the automatic focus of everybody else, because there will often be more valuable targets around, which means that you will often be on the side of either teaming up with someone or just taking advantage of a situation, rather than being the one guy that everybody's following and everyone is ganking up on to try to get some of that valuable loot. Now, some time ago, the mobs were a bit rescaled and made stronger, and PvE in general became more difficult, especially for solo players and small groups. And this, in my opinion, has made tier 8 a bit better than it was before. And it's in a place right now where it can kind of almost compete with tier 7 for being one of the most profitable tiers in general. But it still requires more game knowledge and experience and skill, because every death will start costing more if you consistently go out in tier 8 as opposed to tier 7. Now, depending on the build you're using, it's going to be maybe between 2.5 to 3 times more expensive to die, so you need to be a bit better. But tier 8 does make good money because you can handle PvE, you can go in higher level abbeys, enchanted maps in the open world, and handle them much better. Now, if you're wondering about, okay, but all people that are playing lower or higher tiers, then why? Note that there's a couple answers. First of all, not everybody is obsessed with making maximum silver. That's not everybody's main goal, and that's good. I mean, there's different ways and different ideas and goals when you're playing the game. Generally, lower tiers are very simple to make profit with. Because you risk nothing, you get either simple opponents to fight and so on. So in PvP related content, you almost always make profit, but that profit is generally slow, unless you are already very experienced or you have insane luck. As for very high tiers, the thrill of higher stakes makes it fun. It's a lot of adrenaline, it's potential for fighting other very good players, but it takes experience and knowledge to really consistently make any money with it at all. Because it's very easy to die, because there's people following you. If you go out in 8-3 into full loot, you will probably experience this pretty fast. There's people following you, ganging up on you, always trying to get you because you're worth so much. And it's very easy to die and lose your 20+ mil set in full loot, and it will take a lot of time and a lot of those ganking simple kills to make up for that loss. So for maximum profits, if that's your goal, choose tier 7. That is absolutely my advice to you. Tier 6 and tier 8 are kind of close runner-ups. Everything else is of course viable, and you can feel free to play different strategies, but so I mean like high IP strategy, low IP strategy, but everything else will be less consistent and on average less profitable. Let's move on. Next, let's have a quick talk about awakening weapons. There's a simple answer to whether you should awaken or how you should awaken for max profits, but let me first, before that simple answer, let me quickly explain one way to think about awakened weapons that has helped me and I hope will help you as well. So in Albion, as you know, enchantment level is same as going up one tier, so 4.1 is the same as tier 5. Meaning 4.4 is the same as tier 8. With every tier, a weapon scales and starts doing more damage, both with attacks as well as skills. Melee weapons give more HP as they go up in tiers, and there's other things about the spells that scale a little bit, like for example the CC duration. So if your weapon slows or stuns, it's likely that higher IP, that weapon will slow or stun for longer. Now, the way I suggest you think about awakened weapons is as follows. It's essentially like upgrading your weapon to a higher tier, but it allows you to customize how exactly you upgrade it and what parts of it scale. So instead of upgrading from tier 8 equivalent, which would be 4.4, to tier 9 equivalent, which I guess would be 5.4 then, instead of that, you take a 4.4 weapon and you upgrade it to tier 9 equivalent, but you get to choose the custom upgrades. So for example, you have a carving sword, you don't want to do more right-click damage, like you normally would if you upgraded it. Instead, you want it to give you more HP and maybe lifesteal. Okay, so you got to choose the custom upgrades. This essentially means that if you want to play an awakened weapon, the lowest option you have is a 4-4 weapon, which is already a tier 8 equivalent, and with attunement it becomes a tier 9 equivalent with those custom upgrades. So, referring back to what I just talked about earlier in this video, you are going in with at least tier 9 equivalent weapon, which is not ideal for money making. It's already too high tier. Plus, you're paying an extra premium to get those custom upgrades as opposed to just taking a tier 9 equivalent carving. And this means that you start risking too much money for every death for it to be consistently profitable. So all the things we discussed earlier about very high IP strategies, it essentially applies. So if you are very good, you can still of course make profits and it can be a very fun way to play the game, but it's not going to make as much money on average as a tier 7 or tier 8 simple build. However, it is fun to gamble for attunements and then take high risk fights, so decide what you prefer. This video is about max profits, not max fun. Final little point that I've experienced is that Awakening, one problem about Awakening is that it's almost impossible not to go too far and to not overspend. Because it's so easy, you want to get that one extra spin, maybe I get a crit, and then I end up, at least for me that's happened many times, I end up paying millions of silver for that 0.2% extra something, which really is not worth it if your goal is making profits. And obviously also, like I mentioned earlier in this video and in other videos, if you risk a lot, you start playing worse as well if you're not used to it or if you don't have already a very good economy from other sources. So consider these things, and my advice in general, if you want to maximize silver gains and you're not just going there for fun or other reasons, then Awakening Weapons is probably not a good idea. Let's move on. The next question you might be having when going out to make some silver in PvP related content is, what build do I actually play? I generally suggest that you choose the weapons and builds that feel fun to play for you, but I will give you 2 more specific answers. And this video is not about which build is best, obviously, but whatever builds you are considering, here's 2 things I've learned from my experience. Number 1, becoming a real specialist with a decent build seems to be much more profitable than chasing the meta or jumping from one build to another or trying to, find the theoretically correct answer, so to speak. So if there's something you like and you become really good at that, you're likely going to make a lot more silver. Number 2 is to consider that as you go higher in IP, fight selection becomes the most important thing that you need to think about. So if you're going for lower IP strategy, and I've talked about this in other videos, and if you haven't seen yet, I actually have 2 very good videos, one ranking different weapons when you go for low IP strategy and one going for middle, so check those out if you haven't. But when it comes to making silver, I strongly suggest that if you go with low IP, you prioritize having a build that has potential to get very big upset kills, to make big paydays from 1 or 2 good fights while you're dying a lot. And if you go with a bit higher IP, already starting tier 7, tier 8, then you should prioritize fight selection tools that will allow you to avoid PvP situations that you don't want and force the kind of PvP fights that you do want. The next step is actually buying the items that you've decided you want to use. And here I have 4 quick ideas or pointers for you. Number 1 is that buy orders are obviously a very efficient way to do it, but I personally am a bit too lazy and unpredictable, so I don't usually use them, and it's not the biggest deal if you don't want to either. However, what I really suggest that you do is always compare different tier equivalents, meaning if you're going out in tier 7, check out the price of 4.3, 5.2, 6.1 and 7.0 item that you want to use. Sometimes it's a difference of plus minus 10%, which still counts if you buy a lot of sets, but I've also seen a case where 4.4 Mistwalker jacket cost 2 times less than buying a 5.3 Mistwalker jacket, which is obviously a huge difference that you should never, overlook and accidentally spend way too much for the essentially same thing. Quick tip number 3 is that rerolling quality is generally a bad idea. In fact, I wouldn't obsess over quality at all. You can go with excellent, which is generally in most markets the optimal point where you get extra IP with reasonable cost. But if you're dressed up in all excellent, fewer people will fight you because you look scarier. So figure this out for yourself. But rerolling quality is generally economically a bad idea. And final little tip, which actually I almost have a whole video about, is to be very conscious on which items you are upgrading. Don't waste silver on upgrading items that do not scale, such as, for example, Martlock Cape or Undead Cape. Just buy the cheapest one. And to really be efficient and also get more people to fight you by keeping your average IP low, focus on the pieces of your build that matter. Upgrading your chest armor and weapon will make a big difference in how strong you are. Upgrading your boots to higher tier is almost a negligible difference. You can easily go out with tier 4 boots even when you're playing 6-3 and still be fine. Helmet is kind of build dependent. For some builds, upgrading helmet, it does nothing, but for others it is crucial to have more mana pool, which usually depends on your helmet the most. And so this brings us to the final question when we are buying items and preparing for our PvP content, and that is consumables. This can be a very confusing topic for newer players, but becomes kind of obvious second nature for most experienced ones. I am not going to tell you which food type or potion to use with what specific build. You need to figure that out for yourself when you choose what build you play. Observe other experienced players or streamers who play the build that you like and check out what they use and start from there. However, I will give you something else quite important, and that's a budget. Look at your build's value. Once you buy your items, how much does your equipment cost? Now take this number and take 20% of it. This is your minimum budget for consumables. So if your build costs 1 million, spend at least 200,000 on consumables. This includes all potions, so if you have different ones for different situations. This includes food and siphoned energy for overcharging. Do not go out in a 5 million silver set while using 5,000 silver potions like the guy in this fight that I analyzed a couple months ago. It's like buying a Ferrari and then having it serviced at the cheapest, shadiest car mechanic around the corner. Having good healing potions, higher tier food is absolutely worth it. Now, originally I was gonna say in this video that your budget for consumables should be between 20 and 50% of the cost of your items, but I realized that I'm breaking this rule pretty often, and sometimes when I play lower tier, like tier 6, I even noticed that my inventory of consumables costs the same or almost more than my entire set. So I would say that the more experienced you get, the more you can and should invest in bringing different food, different potions, a lot of potions, to make sure that if you do get into a good fight, you won't be the guy running out of healing pots or running out of food swaps or whatever will happen in the situation. The reason your budget should start from 20% and then increase as you become more experienced is because as you get more game knowledge, you will almost never die in PvP content unless you're willingly taking the risk. Open world is a bit riskier because you can get ganked, but for Mists and Roads of Avalon, it's gonna be pretty difficult to die unless you are willingly putting yourself in that situation, so you can afford to bring a lot of stuff in your inventory, even equipment swaps at some point, and feel fine, and it will become more profitable for you. And the second money-making strategy that relates to consumables specifically is to bring siphoned energy almost always and use it liberally. I have a separate video on that. I get tired of saying that, but I actually do have a video on overcharging. But as a general rule, Albion online players do not overcharge enough, at least from an economical standpoint. Maybe this is because inexperience, maybe you just want the challenge of a fight. I understand that, that's fine. For, maximum feeling of machismo, you should never overcharge and always just go into a fight against higher IP opponents. But for maximum profits, overcharging very liberally is a good strategy. And with this, let's move to the second part of this video, which is about mindsets and tactics for actual PvP environments. So you've chosen and bought all the good items, you are pumped and ready to go for actual PvP content now. What are some mindsets or approaches that will help you make the most silver while you're there? Number one principle that I suggest you adopt is zero shame gaming. Let me explain. You are completely free. You should have no shame in playing the game in any which way you want. Absolutely zero. For maximum silver, you need to get rid of the idea that some ways of playing the game are wrong or some are more honorable or whatever. You don't owe anybody anything. You can rat anyone you want, you can gank, you can run away from a fight just because you don't feel like taking it. You are free to do anything you want. You can even run around on your horse following an 8.3 guy for 10 minutes, although that might end up being a waste of time, but you don't owe anybody anything. Of course, this is all within what is allowed by the developer. Real cheating is, in my opinion, inexcusable, but within the rules of the game, you are completely free. I hope it's clear that this mindset doesn't mean you need to always rat everybody and kill every 4.0 beginner that you come across. Of course not. You can still do whatever you want, and you probably won't want to attack everybody. But if you feel free and you get rid of this shame of playing a game your way, I guarantee that you will make more money because you will have more emotional freedom to take advantage of whatever situation you have in front of you. You see guys fighting and you feel like helping one of them, sure, go for it. You see an opportunity to make bank by running away and then joining the multi-way fight later, you will feel better and you will actually be able to take advantage of that. And that's really one of the key ways to making a lot of money in PvP situations. If you want to get better, I suggest that you don't run away from risky fights, but if you want to make silver, I suggest you start by giving yourself the freedom to do so. There's also an extra benefit to embracing this nature of the game and giving yourself freedom to be ratty or play in whichever way you want, which is that you then also are better equipped to react to other players doing the same because it's simpler for you to understand and expect, and if you see someone on your screen, you already know that they are planning probably to take advantage of the situation, so you'll be better prepared for it. Mindset number 2 for making more silver. It is very difficult to force others to die in full loot PvP. Nobody wants to lose, and the sandbox nature of the game means that most players will be constantly looking out for ways to have advantages and quote-unquote unfair fights in their favor. This is the result of the sandboxy game design. It happens in other games just as much. Go play Hunt Showdown or Escape from Tarkov and you'll get the exact same experience. But you can take advantage of this by adapting to this type of ecosystem. The biggest step is to accept this reality. A lot of people will not fight you unless they think that they will probably win. It's very difficult in Albion to force others to die to you, and because of this, the biggest skill that you can start learning and developing in PvP which is going to make you the biggest profits you can imagine, is the skill of baiting. Baiting comes in great many forms. You can create a build with some surprise factors that some enemies won't know about. You can backload your big damage or strongest defensive spells to the end to surprise enemies. You can intentionally even miss or waste spells to create interest in somebody you believe you can outplay. Even swapping certain spells or items once your enemy has already shown interest. All of those are forms of baiting, and you can be creative. But accept here today, as you watch this video, once and for all, for as long as you play Albion, accept right now that it is very difficult to force others to die to you in Albion PvP. So you have two options if you want to make silver. Either you'll learn to bait people and outsmart them, or you just fuck off and go find the next person who might be willing to fight. I cannot count the times, the amount of times I've died and the amount of silver I've lost on both the servers of my time playing Albion by essentially trying to force people that I think should fight me into fights, using mobility to chase them and trying to taunt them, trying to, follow people 2 tiers higher until they finally fight or not, and then dying because of being overly aggressive and because of not seeing this as a baiting skill, but rather just ramming my head against the wall until a fight happens. Now, this is probably a decent approach to learning PvP and maybe even a very fun one, but it is absolutely not the most profitable way to play the game, which is what this video is about. For maximum profits, accept that you cannot force others to die to you in Albion PvP generally, so you need to either bait or go find the next person or next situation or contest the next objective. My strategy number 3 for you is that you suck in the morning. Now, I don't necessarily mean literal morning. whenever you play Albion, maybe you play during weekends, so it is actually the morning, maybe you play after work or after school, or you just have a free day, whatever. When you start your Albion session, you are usually not gonna be right at your top. Especially if you play different builds, or if there's been a little bit of a break, if you didn't just finish playing, go to sleep and then wake up, but maybe you did some other things, or maybe you skipped a couple days. I've learned that what I used to do was not as profitable at all, which is that I essentially played a build, and if I survived with it, I put it in the bank or even kept it on me, and next time I played Albion, I just kept going with that build. I suggest that you kind of ramp up a little bit. So if you're starting a session, let's say you're starting to play a Saturday morning, you have like maybe a whole day or a couple hours, then go buy tier 6 first. Get a couple kills, maybe you will die, maybe you'll make some money, and then upgrade to tier 7. Especially after dying, it's good time to buy new items, but even if you don't die, then go tier 8, and if you want to go higher, you can go, 4-4-6-3, whatever, but at least for me, it worked pretty well to not just take the same set and continue playing it, but go a bit lower to kind of rev up and warm myself up, and this is especially important if you're changing builds a lot, and if you haven't played for thousands of hours yet. So if today you feel like playing a Frost Staff and tomorrow you're playing a Spear and then you go carving, then I suggest starting a bit lower and then ramping up to not just, go with the automatic kind of, I already played this set yesterday, I'm just going to continue, because you suck in the morning, and at the beginning of a session, warming up is a good idea. Strategy or mindset number 4 is that objectives are for PvP. This is especially true for Mists. This is also true for open world, and a little bit less clearly so because Roads of Avalon are often there for gathering, but if we're talking about chests on the map, then absolutely also true for Roads of Avalon. The objectives that show up on the map, whether it be camps or chests, coffers, crystal creatures, those wisps that you have to transport, those are for PvP. Get into this mentality. Of course, you will get a lot of them without being contested, especially if there aren't that many people active at the time. It can happen. But do not go into a camp expecting that you are, this PvE player. You're just going to clear a camp to get some profit. If you want to just make simple silver, kill the roaming mobs. In the open world or in the mist, of course, camps are fun, and I made some good money from camp chests, even though they were nerfed quite a bit some time ago, but still, camps are fun. You kind of roll the lottery ticket, maybe you'll get something good, but don't go into camps or don't go into any objectives without the idea that this is for PvP. You are there for either for fighting other players or being attacked by other players. The reason I emphasize this as a separate point is because I've seen guides that maybe they were partly are just outdated, maybe they were partly wrong to begin with, that seem to suggest that prioritizing camps is the best way to make money without having to, kill other players essentially. And this is wrong. Camps and other objectives are primarily there for PvP, and that's the mindset you should have when you go there. It doesn't mean you need to fight everybody you see or you need to fight at all. You can do what you want with your life and in Albion, but understand that if you go to any objective, that is there primarily for PvP. And final strategy is Mist specific for making as much silver as you can, is to prioritize heavily Nightfall Abbeys. This is actually the only reason why sometimes I feel like tier 8 or tier 9 can even compete in average profitability with the tier 7 that I earlier sang the praises for. And that is because tier 8 and tier 9 handle higher level Abbeys very well. And Abbeys remain, even after nerfs to all kinds of mist loot, Abbeys remain one of the best ways to make silver as a solo player. If your goal is silver, then it's a good idea to visit and clear as many rooms as you can in an abbey. First of all, to get stacks for the potential fight at the end, so you have an advantage. It's, by the way, an amazing opportunity to get high value kills, because if you have 10 more stacks than a higher IP opponent, you're almost like you are the higher IP one sometimes. And secondly, the more rooms you clear, the more chests you can potentially open, and those chests are generally very valuable. And those of you that have played a lot of Mists and Abbeys, I'm sure that you already have an intuition for which rooms are good to clear, which are simple, and which require a lot more effort for the same reward. So as you play more, you can start, prioritizing going from small or simple room to simple room to get more stacks and more money. And now for the final part of this video, we are going to talk a little bit about cashing in your profits. So you've bought your items, you've selected well, you've played the content, what happens next? And by the way, thank you. I appreciate the fact that you are still here listening and hopefully enjoying thinking and talking and learning about Albion together with me. I hope that you will be able to apply some or all of the things we talk about to your game and essentially have the silver that you need in order to enjoy Albion your way in the future. So let's talk about cashing in your profits. I definitely don't know all the secrets of selling items for maximum profit in Albion, but there are a couple things I've experienced and know very clearly, and here goes. Number one, transport is a separate activity. The fact that you received an item from a chest or from a kill that seems to you like it's very valuable, but in order to realize its value, you think you need to take it to Caerleon for the black market. That does not mean that you need to be the person taking it there. If you enjoy transporting, and that's a part of the game that can be fun for some, I guess, then do it, of course. If you know how to do it, you can learn, do it. But it is a separate activity. You are not the guy who needs to transport it. And in general, transporting is a much lower profit activity than actually playing the Mists or the other types of PvP content. Unless you are really good at it and transport a lot in bulk. So, you're better off generally selling this item wherever you are in Brazilian for a lower price and then going back into the Mists to continue generating more profit. But feel free to transport, just treat it as a separate activity. Point number two is that it's generally a good idea to go to a bank when your profits that you are carrying surpass the value of the equipment you're risking. So if you went out in 1 million silver set, and now your inventory has more than 1 million in silver, in profits, then go out and bank it. I've made this mistake, and of course, if you want to have more fun, you can just continue fighting and you don't care about money. Sure, don't do this. But this video is about making silver, and I have made this mistake, and trust me, it really stings. It feels really bad to go out in a 2 million silver set, which I've done many times, get some good fights, maybe find some good loot and just continue going. And then I get into a fight, I die, and I realize that on top of the 2 million I invested into my equipment, I had another 4 or 5 million in my inventory that I just did not go and bank. And it hurts. And I suggest that whenever your inventory is worth more than the equipment you had with you, then start thinking about going out and banking. This makes unlocking Brazilian and living in Brazilian exceptionally valuable because it's very simple to always just exit the Mist without any extra hassle and go back in. And kind of the same for roads. A bit more difficult to exit, but it still makes the process more enjoyable generally. With the new safe portals, you can also do this with the open world actually. Point number 3, when you are selling your items that you made from whatever content you played, patience is key. Absolutely do not change the buy order to match the sell order to match the lowest one every 5 hours because you're worried it's not going to be sold. I understand if you're hard pressed for money, you don't have a lot in your bank in Albion, then it feels like, okay, I would rather just sell it fast. And that's fine, but just accept you're going to lose a lot of money that way. Patience is key. Even if you don't do any market research, you just put it on the market to match the lowest sell order, keep it there. I would say at least 3-4 days, maybe even a week without changing it. Unless there's a huge market change that is obvious, just keep it there. I have this experience since I take breaks, as you've maybe noticed with my channel as well, but I have been taking some breaks from Albion since EU launched, and it's never been the case that I come back. Okay, last time I came back and there was one item in 2 cities which were full of sell orders of all kinds of random things. There was one item that didn't sell after I took a break from, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And the other time I was out for a month and absolutely everything sold. Even the craziest, quirkiest item that I thought, oh, nobody's ever gonna buy this, somehow sold. I guess someone took it to black market. So when you put out sell orders for items that you made from Mists or Roads of Avalon, then just be patient and don't keep changing them up and down. You're actually paying a premium every time you change your sell order, so you're just wasting money essentially and worrying about nothing. And the final tip for selling items is, if you're not sure which market to sell which item to, which to sell in Brazilian, which to take to whatever specific royal cities, there is a lot of logic to that. But I have not looked into it in Albion. I have actually been an Microsoft Excel type of player in another game in my life. It was old school RuneScape, so I know that it can be fun, and I know that you can, lose yourself in market calculation and trading for hours and days and even longer, but it never really attracted me in Albion, so I don't know, and the markets change and the specifics of the servers are different, so I don't know exactly which item to sell where, but I have done pretty well with just the general rule to sell all the commonly traded items in Brazilian and take the rarer, not so common or weirder ones that might be used in niche content, take all of those to royal cities. And my suggestion to you is, of course, do it if it's fun for you, but just like transporting, this market analysis thing should be a separate activity. It's not something that you have to do. You can just sell your items. You will lose a little bit of efficiency, but it's a separate activity that you can undertake, but it's not something you have to do for the items that you made or randomly looted from a dungeon or a chest or a coffer or whatever content you did. Silver in Albion Online is a simple way to track one part of your progression in the game, and it almost uniquely connects all the completely different parts of Albion Online. It compares and puts into the same system different types of content which otherwise would have almost nothing to do with each other. So in many ways, thanks to Silver, we are actually playing the same game called Albion Online, even though we might be doing it in completely different ways. Silver also acts as a way to open the gates to some parts of the game and some types of content that require you to have an economy built up a bit already to truly enjoy. What I've shared with you in this video is things that I've learned and observed about how to make as much silver as you can, essentially, from the PvP side of Albion, and mostly from the solo, duo or small scale PvP side of Albion. However, it is also very clear to me that making silver should almost never be the only goal you have in the game, because it can very easily start shutting down other forms of progression, such as learning and becoming better, which requires you, as I've said in earlier videos, requires you to take risks and die a lot and lose a lot. And it can also sometimes limit the kind of fun that you're able to get from the PvP situations that are in front of you. But it's your life, your rules, and you decide what your goals are. And I hope that the things I've learned, the things I've observed, and the mistakes that I've made can, through this video, help you make that road towards your goals in Albion a little bit more enjoyable. At the end of the day, winning more PvP fights will always make you more silver, so if you want to learn how to do that, check out other videos on my channel. For example, this one where I talk specifically about using the Purge spell in solo PvP.